Hey guys, it's John from Physical Living, and in this video I'm going to talk about the differences between push-ups and dips, which I think are both great exercises that pretty much everybody involved in strength training should be including in their routine on a fairly regular basis. Each one has unique advantages and disadvantages, and depending on who you are and what your goals are and maybe some other factors, that may determine which exercise you might want to prioritize a little bit more in your routine. So I'm just going to blab about that for a few minutes, and hopefully something I say is helpful for you. So, just so we're crystal clear, everybody knows what a push-up is, right? It's a horizontal pushing exercise that human beings have been doing for thousands of years, right? They're great. For the purpose of this video, I'm talking about the full spectrum of push-up exercises because there are so many different variations available, and that's one of the major benefits of push-ups, is that there is so much variety. On the other hand, when I'm talking about dips, I'm referring specifically to parallel bar dips like these, as opposed to bench supported dips, which are done with your hands behind you on a bench and your feet kind of propped out in front of you. Unfortunately, I don't have a bench here to demonstrate it for you. But I'm referring specifically to parallel bar dips because that's the variation that I prefer. It's a personal preference based on my biases. In my experience, here's the reason for those biases. In my experience, most people do not have the mobility, especially at the shoulder, and just the general flexibility necessary to perform bench dips safely with their shoulders stabilized, packed down on their torso. And so for that reason, I tend to prefer parallel bar dips, which I think can be done more easily, more safely by most people. And there's a lot of people who they can do bench dips, but they can't do parallel bar dips. And so if that's you, then I'll give you one kind of bonus progression in this video. Generally, parallel bar dips are done with your feet, just free hanging in space, but all you got to do to make it easier to progress it down to a more doable level is put your feet down and support some of your body weight. So as you do your dip, you're pressing through your arms as much as you can, and you're using your feet like training wheels to support just as much of your body weight as you need to complete the reps. And so that's how I generally prefer most people work up to dips after they've laid the proper foundation with push-ups. Of course, we'll talk about that in a minute. So in this video, I'm referring specifically to that movement pattern, and it can be done on not just dip bars, but with other tools. You can do it on 2 high boxes, for instance, or a suspensions training system like a set of rings. But I'm referring to that movement pattern, not the bench supported dip movement pattern. So push-ups are a horizontal pressing exercise, right? Because you're pushing horizontally in relation to your torso. And dips are a vertical pressing exercise because you're pressing vertically in relation to your body. So they're both pressing exercises, but they're sometimes described as training your pressing muscles at a different angle. And that's true. Another way of saying it would be that you're training your pressing muscles or your pressing movement patterns through a different range of motion or in different degrees of freedom, like just a different place in space. And so that it's all true, it's just different ways of explaining the same thing that's happening. But what happens when you train these different movement patterns is, you're training all the same muscle groups because both push-ups and dips are going to largely focus on the chest, the pectorals, the shoulders, the deltoids, and the backs of your arms, your triceps. They both emphasize those muscle groups, but each one is going to emphasize the muscle groups in different ways in different places. There's different variations of each exercise that you can use to focus on certain areas of the muscle group. So, for instance, a lot of people know that if you use a wider hand placement on your push-ups, it's going to emphasize your chest a little bit more than a narrow placement. If you use a diamond position where your hands are almost together, it's going to emphasize your triceps a lot more than otherwise. And it's the same thing with dips. So if you, for instance, if you lean forward with your torso a little bit more when you're performing your dips, it's going to focus on your chest a little bit more than if you're more vertical with your posture, which is going to focus more on your triceps. And so each exercise can be adjusted. You can make minor adjustments to focus on different areas of the muscles. But generally speaking, each exercise is going to train the same muscle groups but emphasize different areas. And so for your standard dip exercise, all of that was kind of a pre-qualifier for this because it just depends. And which muscles that it emphasizes for you, that activates for you, it really depends on all kinds of factors: your technique, your training experience, any muscle imbalances that you may have. Some people have really overdeveloped triceps and that end up doing most of the work. There's just so many different factors, but generally speaking, all that aside, generally speaking, on the parallel bar dips, it's going to emphasize your triceps, your anterior deltoid, the front of your shoulder, and your lower pectorals a little bit more than the other areas of the musculature. And also, generally speaking, your standard push-up is going to kind of distribute the load a little bit more evenly, all throughout the chest, the shoulder, the backs of your arms, and throughout your core as well. You know, they're both full body exercises, but the dip is more of an upper body dominant exercise than the push-up, simply because your legs are hanging in space. And you're supporting yourself completely on your arms. And with the push-up, your feet are on the ground and they're supporting some of your weight, so your core has to be tight to maintain your posture. And so it's like performing a moving plank when you do push-ups. And so all this has to be, you know, very much activated as well. And it should be when you're performing dips, but it's not as important. And so because you're supporting some of your weight with your feet, because the muscular focus is a little bit more evenly distributed, push-ups are an easier exercise for most people than dips, and that's why most people can do a lot more push-ups than they can do of dips. You know, a guy who can do 30, 40, 50 push-ups might only be able to do 5, 10, 15 dips. And with training, you can completely lopside those. You can have people who only train dips who are terrible at push-ups, and they can do a lot more dips than push-ups. So it just depends on what you're training. But generally speaking, in a more balanced trainee, you're going to be able to do a lot more push-ups than dips because it's an easier exercise. And because of that, I kind of view push-ups as a precursor to dips, kind of a building block, a progression exercise. And so I'm going to recommend that pretty much everybody master the push-up first. Make sure you can do a good 20 or 30 push-ups at least, and ideally even more than that, before you move on to dips, because you want to lay that good, proper foundation of strength and stability and control in these muscle groups and joints before you move on to a more advanced exercise where you're literally supporting all of your body weight. If you don't do the assisted version, there's no reason why you can't do the assisted version. I recommend it when you get started. But this is definitely dips are definitely a more advanced exercise for that reason. One of the main advantages of push-ups is its versatility, like I talked about earlier. There's so many different push-up variations you can do, and this is helpful not only because you can focus on certain training goals, like I really want to emphasize this part of the muscle, or I want to train this movement pattern, or I want to change the speed, or there's so many different things that you can change, but it also makes push-ups a lot more easily scalable than dips. And so it doesn't matter who you are, what your conditioning experience is, if you've been a couch potato for the last 50 years or an elite athlete for the last 15 years, there's a push-up variation for you, and that can challenge you properly. You can drop it down to your knees, you can do them on the wall, you can move up to single arm push-up variations, and that is, I'd say, one of the main advantages of push-ups over dips is not just the versatility, which is kind of an obvious one because there's so many different, you can change the hand placement, you can stagger them, you can elevate one hand and focus on the other side a little bit more. You can use all kinds of different training tools like resistance bands. There's hundreds of push-up exercises, so I'm trying not to belabor this too much. But one of the major perks of push-ups is that you can do single arm push-ups safely and progressively, and that's not the case with dips. There's no way to safely and progressively, so that I've seen in my experience, to safely work up to a single arm unilateral dipping movement pattern. I've seen some examples of guys doing that in YouTube videos, but I've never seen one example of somebody doing it in a safe, controlled manner. So I could see that happening as like a stunt or circus trick, but other than that, for those of us who are training for health, for fitness, for longevity, who want to make it for the long haul, you're going to want to stick with 2-arm bilateral dip exercises. So that is definitely one of the advantages of push-ups, because there's a lot of benefit to be had from those single arm push-up exercises. Whether or not you work up to full 1-arm push-ups, even if you just use some of the variations like the building blocks to that to emphasize one side over the other, you're going to get a lot of benefit out of that. And I think pretty much almost anybody with proper training can work up to 1-arm push-ups over time. So that's kind of the major advantage of the push-up family of exercises. The major advantage with dips is that they can be loaded to a great amount much more easily than push-ups. And so with dips, you can use a dip belt and just wrap it around your hips and thread this through some free weights, a barbell weight plate or a dumbbell or a kettlebell, and you can load it up very heavy to greatly increase the load and thus the stimulus of that movement pattern. It's much more difficult to load push-ups to a great extent. You know, there's different things you can do. You can wear a weight vest, but weight vests can only get so heavy. You know, I know guys who can do dips with over their body weight. You know, like you gotta get 200-pound guy who can do dips with over 200 pounds attached to him. You're not going to find anybody who can find a practical way to attach 200 pounds to them for push-ups without some help, like a partner. You could absolutely do that, have your buddy sit on your shoulders or whatever. You know, so the dip is definitely superior from a loading standpoint. And so for that reason, I think it's also a superior choice for maximizing your upper body strength and muscle development. So if that's a goal of yours, you want to get really strong and build a lot of muscle, then you should probably prioritize the dip in your routine. And you should do push-ups too, of course. But this will probably be one of your primary upper body pushing exercises. So I think that's you know, kind of the important stuff. I could talk forever about this silly geek stuff, you know, basically the conclusion is that I like both exercises, and I think that pretty much everybody who can do both exercises with proper technique and without pain can and should make liberal use of both push-ups and dips. I consider them like the top two body weight exercises for pressing movement patterns, and you're going to get much better results, more well-rounded development if you use both of them. So hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. That's why I make these videos, to help you guys out. So feel free to get in touch with me at any time. I think that's all I'm going to say today. So thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you, and take care.